Hi, I'm Sarah Lister from Sheffield Digital, and today I'm talking to Mena Simpson, who is a front-end developer at Vouch. How did you get into this type of work?
Yeah, so essentially my background has always been sort of like design based. So I started off doing photography. I used to be a picture researcher and a picture editor. I used to work within sort of like magazines and sort of newspapers. I realized it kind of wasn't really sustainable. I sort of hit a plateau after a certain amount of time and realized I needed something a little bit more challenging. Um, and kind of marrying my sort of design skills with something a bit more technical, web development and sort of like front end work, it kind of made sense. So that's sort of what I sort of set my sights towards. So yeah.
And what were the first few steps that you took? Because it sounds like quite a big career change, really. So, what were your first steps into becoming what you're doing now?
Yeah, so to begin with, a lot of tutorials. So everyone kind of goes through sort of similar routes. So a lot of things on Udemy, Code Academy, that kind of thing, just YouTube tutorials. Um, when I moved to Sheffield, I was actually working at a couple of call centers, but I was dead set on making sure that I could try and become a front end developer. So one of the things that I tried to do while I was doing that line of work was any IT department that was within the building, I'd sort of go and shadow them. I'd ask them questions just to literally be around them while they're at their screen, sort of looking at code, just trying to get like a feel, like anything for it. So as I say, started off doing kind of little bits on the side, my own little projects, tutorials, that kind of thing, trying to get little bits and pieces at work where I could. And as I say, it was literally a case of just watching people code sometimes, sort of coming in before work, asking them questions about what was on screen. And then eventually I kind of built up the confidence to start freelancing. So it was only really small things, a lot of rejection. A lot of people say, no, not interested. The system we have works fine. So that was, again, a really good sort of skill, a good learning curve to kind of understand the things that you do and how they marry to sort of the wider world and the skills that you have and what people would want and maybe don't necessarily want. So that was very valuable. So as I say, a lot of kind of the basic things, tutorials online. Eventually, got a little portfolio together. And yeah, just started applying for things basically. So that was kind of a little brief intro, but yeah, that's how I started.
And what was it that made you want to be a front end developer so much? Why were you so determined?
So I'll be honest, I think it was kind of a mix of things that I'd seen on TV. I suppose I was kind of green to what it actually entails. I think some things are kind of true to life. I used to watch a lot of TV shows. So there's one show I'm not sure if you've seen called Startup, which is just about this tech startup in Florida and this kind of like crack team of developers that are kind of like working around the clock to kind of get things done. And sort of seeing little things like that, I thought, oh, that looks kind of cool. That seems like a sustainable thing that is challenging, makes good money, and yeah, makes you think. So I was kind of tired of doing things that I wasn't really. I was kind of like switching off, kind of watching the clock, and I knew I wanted something that was a little bit more engaging, somewhere where you could be making work and kind of see the output of what you're doing sort of out there for people to use. So yeah, that kind of made sense to me. But as I say, me personally, sort of from a design background, getting into coding front end seemed kind of like the most exciting. So I could sort of see like the visual elements of it. And yeah, it sort of just made sense to me to sort of go from there. So yeah.
What skills are an important part of your role?
That's a good question. So, so yeah, definitely thinking on your feet, I would say, is becoming more and more sort of crucial. No 2 days are exactly the same. Even if you are expecting things to kind of go one way, there's always going to be something that sort of pops up. So it's being sort of reactive, and also maybe looking a little bit further on down the line and sort of seeing how things may change and sort of trying to adapt to things coming up as well. Um, I'd say personally having a good sense of humor helps because the hours can get kind of crazy when you've got deadlines and whatnot and things get down to the crunch. it helps to sort of be a little bit lighthearted sometimes when the work can be kind of intense. But yeah, I would say those things are definitely key. And also just the desire, like the drive to sort of learn, because essentially I didn't go through kind of like uni. I was sort of self-taught, if you want to call it that. But it was kind of important for me to sort of know that this is really what I wanted to do, because you'll get to points where it gets really, really hard. And the only thing to kind of motivate you is your sort of desire. So I think as long as you kind of got that sort of flame and you want to learn and you want to sort of know things and how things work and sort of improve, as well as like a sense of humor, I think those two things will sort of do you fine. So yeah, those are key for me.
Brilliant. And what's been involved in the transition from being a front-end developer to being a full stack developer, which you're working towards now?
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny one actually. So I'm currently working at Vouch, and when I applied for this job, it was for a front-end developer. I didn't actually realize I was going to be doing sort of more full stack work. So my current role at the moment is a software engineer. So sort of gradually, sort of day by day, inch by inch, it was sort of more things that weren't necessarily just purely front end based. So there's a lot of things to do, sort of microservices, kind of cloud architecture, looking at kind of like back end things as well. Because I guess even as a front end developer, you kind of have to understand how these things sort of work to be able to inform what you're doing. So it's kind of like gradually I was sort of getting more and more tasks that weren't sort of just sort of front end kind of like design based, UI, UX sort of based things. And then again, I was working with, and still am working with, like a really good team of developers. So kind of seeing how they sort of solved problems and sort of, developed and kind of like made things. It made me sort of see what they were doing and think to myself like, oh, well, there's a lot more than just the front end aspect of things. And yeah, it kind of spurred me on a little bit more, I guess. But yeah, and then as I say, learning sort of C# is kind of like one of the big things. So on a day-to-day, I'm sort of using React and TypeScript, but the slide or the kind of like shift from say TypeScript to C# is, they're kind of similar in some ways. And so that kind of helps. But yeah, having like a good team around you, and yeah, that was kind of the key for me. So yeah.
And has it been challenging for you to learn all of this from scratch, having a sort of different background in design and photography?
Yes. yeah. I'm not gonna lie. It's been difficult, and I think kind of having the enthusiasm, but also not fully understanding what it entailed, definitely was an asset to me. Because when I first started applying for jobs, maybe almost 2 years ago, I didn't really know what I didn't know. So it's like you're doing tutorials, you've got like a portfolio of work, and you're thinking, oh, okay, this is good. I'll just put it out there and see what happens. So the first time around when I started getting interviews, it was a really good way to kind of gauge what I knew and what I didn't know. And again, because I didn't really know any developers at that point, there wasn't really anyone I could sort of turn to as like a mentor, as like a reference point. It was definitely a challenge. I think sort of kind of looking back on it now, what I would probably tell me sort of 2 years ago is kind of like the basic core concepts of sort of computer science. So design patterns, like just looking at sort of clean architecture of code, best practices, just kind of like boring sort of things, but these things can kind of inform what you do sort of later on, and it makes things a lot easier. And just being open as well, I found like was really useful, because I think to begin with, I was like, I'm going to be a front-end developer and just this. And then when I started to sort of open my mind up to other things, it then informed what I was doing as a front-end developer, and it made getting involved in these other technologies a little bit easier as well. So having that open mind was kind of key. But yeah, the transition was definitely hard, because on a day-to-day, what I was doing and what I'm doing now are two separate things. But again, like if you're on it, you wanna get involved, there's space for everyone, you know. So it's possible to do. It's difficult, but you can do it. I had a lot of people saying, "Oh, I don't know about that. You're probably going to struggle," and I did, but it's part of the game, I suppose. So
Yeah, you got through
if
it.
you want it, Yeah, definitely. So
Mm,
yeah.
amazing. And how does Vouch support your career development?
Yeah, so I think one of the really good things at Vouch that they have is the community and the environment here. Um, so in terms of sort of like learning and projects, there are always things that come up. So I'm not sure how it works in other places, but here you kind of have your individual projects over a set period of time, and then kind of like more collaborative things with other sort of team members. So kind of having the back and forth between those sort of two things is really, really good. Um, Again, they kind of encourage you to look into tutorials, do workshops, listening to talks. So obviously because of the lockdown and sort of the pandemic and whatnot, we were kind of tuning into talks every so often, be it kind of like on lunch times or during work or like afterwards. And again, we've got like a really good team, like everyone's really keen to sort of share what they know, and explain things to you as well, which really, really helps. At the moment, I'm doing a little Azure Cloud Fundamentals course. So even little things on the side, just as like formal training, like really help. But yeah, it's a cool place. People have got different logins for things, and everyone shares. Oh, I've got this. I've got a tutorial for this. You could check it out, or I learned this. Have a look at this. So yeah, that kind of cross pollination is really cool here, which it helps a lot.
Brilliant. And what's the work culture like?
Yeah, so it's cool. So I worked at one place prior to here, which is quite different, but at Vouch, everyone is very much on it, but they also know how to have a good time. So it's quite a nice sort of mix of you can look to the person to the left and the right, and you know that they're sort of down for the cause, but people know how to have a laugh. And yeah, good drinks, yeah, cakes. Sometimes it feels a little bit like hot fuzz with just cakes and cakes. But yeah, it's cool. It's cool. It's a good balance. Yeah.
Are you enjoying life in Sheffield?
I am. It's funny. Sheffield is one of these places. When I got here, I was like, I'm going to be here for about 20 minutes, and then I'll leave. And it has a way of sort of just keeping you. Just yeah, because I think I heard that it's got one of the highest retentions of students that come here and sort of stay. So yeah, I came here not as a student, but my partner was studying. And yeah, I thought I was literally going to be here for no longer than a year. And yeah, almost 4 years later, I'm still here. And it doesn't seem like I'm going to be leaving anytime soon. So yeah, Sheffield's cool. I think the one thing I would say about Sheffield, though, is that compared to other cities, there's a lot going on here, but you just have to look a little bit harder. So yeah, I lived in like London, New York for a little bit, and everything is there on the surface. You don't have to look too hard. You don't have to really know anyone in particular to find something cool. Whereas here, there's a lot of really interesting things going on, but I think you just got to dig a little deeper to kind of find it, I'd say. So yeah, shout out Sheffield.
And which aspects of your job do you find most interesting and then most challenging?
Question. So most interesting, I would, if I'm going to be like very specific right now. So I do quite a bit of stuff with React and also GraphQL. So um, those two things were something that I'd never done prior to coming here. I knew a little bit of Angular and mainly sort of just vanilla JavaScript, but that was kind of it. But yeah, things working in React is kind of, yeah, learning new things every single day. And it makes you feel confident as well. So I really enjoy that. And as I say, kind of like GraphQL, sort of interacting a lot more with the backend services. I find that really challenging, but also really interesting. And then you've got the whole Azure sort of cloud microservices situation going on, which again is a whole nother sort of beast in and of itself. But yeah, those three things I find really challenging, but they are also really interesting. Especially when you kind of see how things are going with regard to technology and trends moving forwards. It's cool to kind of be working on interesting sort of tech and using interesting tech. So yeah.
No, that's good. It sounds like the challenging and interesting actually go together.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't really say that there's anything that's not interesting here, which is good, and I guess it's why I'm still here. There are things sometimes that are interesting and not very challenging, which is kind of also nice because it's kind of like an easy win. But yeah, I found out very quickly you kind of need the challenge, even if maybe you don't necessarily like it all the time. It kind of keeps you sharp. So yeah, I'll always try and seek that out and just be open to sort of new things as well. Is yeah, it helps.
And finally,
Yeah.
are there any resources, you've mentioned a few already, but are there any resources, training, or even experiences that you found particularly useful since you started down this new career path?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that come to mind. The first thing I found that was really helpful was getting a portfolio together of work. Just work that you feel proud of. It doesn't necessarily even have to be the most like cutting edge, outrageous stuff. Just things that you would look at and feel like, yeah, this is cool, and getting feedback off that. So applying for jobs, speaking to other developers, putting it out there. I found that that was really useful for me in terms of sort of like my progression and sort of development. Pluralsight in terms of kind of subscription services and that kind of thing, I found was also really good. So just kind of, they have a lot of tutorials for very specific things. So I found sort of when I started out, Code Academy and Udemy were quite good. But for slightly more in-depth things, I found that Pluralsight was pretty good. I wouldn't say there's necessarily anything better than just doing your own work as well, though. Like, as I say, so I guess kind of rounding back to having your own portfolio, because you learn so much when you get stuck, things don't work, and then you figure it out because I guess often you don't really have anyone to ask or to sort of like turn to. But yeah, those things are definitely key. And then when you start sort of making contacts, keeping in contact with everyone that you know. So any developers you meet along the road, just like checking in every so often, seeing how they're doing and kind of like comparing notes, because yeah, it helps to kind of have that network around you, and yeah, you can only get better and stronger, and yeah, it helps to share the information. So that's kind of what I found.
So with the portfolio, were you like creating your portfolio alongside a job that you were working in at the time?
Yes, I was. So I think it was maybe my second call center job that I had when I was in Sheffield, and I was like, oh, I can't keep doing this. This is like grinding on my soul. But it was also kind of like keeping me motivated as well, because I knew that this isn't where I want to be. So something on the other side of this is a good thing. But yeah, so I was working kind of full time, and basically what I did, I had quite a strict sort of regime. So I was trying to treat it like a job. So I'd be like, okay, try and get in maybe like 30 hours if you can. So that would be waking up, because I was doing a lot of shift work. So I'd wake up in the morning, early sometimes, or maybe like early afternoon, depending on when I was working. I'd do a couple of hours before work. I'd try and sneak in a little bit of work at work. And then I'd also do some work after work as well. And then on the weekends, that was kind of when I got I'd say the bulk of my learning done. But yeah, just, I think the consistency was also key. So even if it was like listening to a podcast, like on the way to work, on my way home from work, on my lunch breaks, there was a couple of really good podcasts actually. There's one called Wireframe, which I think is from Adobe, and they do some like really, really interesting episodes about sort of UX and design and kind of how it actually is applied to the everyday world. Some of the guests I have on is like really, really cool. That was helpful. There's another one called Syntax, which I think is more of kind of like a JavaScripty one. That podcast was also like really useful. It's ran about an hour, but they go into detail about various frameworks and sort of plugins and things that you can use, and just talk about their lives. It's two dudes to talk about their lives as developers. So I found that was really helpful as well. And then there's a couple more like niche ones about sort of logic apps and Azure and Python when I was looking into that for all of 20 minutes. But yeah, there's a lot of resources out there, but yeah, the podcasts are, yeah, a good
Brilliant.
resource.
Yeah, I'll include those in the notes then. I'll find the links and include those for people. It sounds like you worked really hard to get to where you are now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, I would say I did.
Yeah,
I
sounds
think
like it.
I think one of the things as well is that it's important to kind of take stock sometimes of like where you are and what you're doing, because with development, it is like really hard. And I think sometimes you don't necessarily give yourself enough credit for what you're actually doing or what you're actually trying to do. So I think it's important every so often just to kind of take a step back and just, yeah, think about what you're doing and sort of make sure that you're still enjoying it, and yeah, kind of congratulate yourself on the little victories, because yeah, it's important. So yeah, but yeah, I'd say I worked pretty hard. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. And thank you for, yeah, letting me sort of share it with you. It's appreciated. So yeah, thank you very much.